Yeah, David Dread of Steel Pulse, and I'm saying hail to Lion Voice because it's time that the lion have its voice, have its own story. Says I'm stepping out here. Hear me now. Yeah, the lion's voice. Raw.
Well, from to us a son was born and a child was given.
I want to ask you a question. Have you got your book? Haile Selassie I, Ethiopia, Volume 1, The Rise of the Priest Warrior King. I've read the book in its entirety, and I must say it's very inspirational, very informative, and very historical, right?
Them call him Rastafari. When he was born, rain fall from the sky. Them call him Rastafari. When he was grown in airplanes he fly. They call him Rastafari. Lion break the chain, weep not, don't cry. Them call him Rastafari. Read the Revelation chapter 5 verse 5. Then born near the city of Harar, the inspiration for Bob Marley's guitar. People crowd him like some big superstar. It no matter if England.
And I showed in the last episode what His Majesty said at the granting of the Constitution, that the people had to share in the governance of the realm. So it's up to the people now to reject this cycle of perpetual war. Haile Selassie first, Kadamawi, so he came first among the people as the emperor to serve, to show building the modern infrastructure of Ethiopia so that it could not be torn apart. Building the modern infrastructure of Ethiopia so that it should not be torn apart. To bring us to this hour where we have something now where all of the kingdoms can be proud to work together as the seat of Africa. Why did Ethiopia win the Battle of Adwa, where the Ashanti failed and the Zulu failed and all of these other mighty kingdoms failed? It's because in that hour they were able to put down their differences. Oromo locking arms with Amhara, locking arms with Somali, locking arms with Tigray against a common foe. They were able to slaughter the Italian forces, the Roman army that came to put them under subjugation, and to ensure that not all black people would go into enslavement. Ethiopia alone withstood that terrible tide. Yes, Haiti was the first slave uprising of enslaved people to become independent, but they were enslaved. Ethiopia, because of Adwa, never had that condition, and it was because these kingdoms came together, and they came together under the crown, under the leadership of the throne. That history cannot be erased, and that history has to be exalted. You know, most of the Oromo are either Christian or Muslim. Ethiopia and that same throne gave refuge to the children of the Prophet Muhammad. So that is not a throne that a Oromo Muslim should be seeking to war against from a spiritual perspective. Also, that throne united these warring factions in that time. Tigray, remember, Rasmangasha, Rasalula being one of the greatest generals Tigray ever produced in the history of Tigray, chose to put down their differences and their hatred and go and bow before Emperor Menelik for the preservation. This is the Ethiopia that glorifies through the history book that we as diaspora in Jamaica read about and are writing about, that made us proud, that made us heights up the Lion of Judah flag even when we were under colonial rule in Jamaica. This is the legacy that made a generation, my generation, where I was born 1977 after His Majesty had disappeared, that made I seek the face of His Imperial Majesty. We are the generation that seek His face, and the trail led us to Ethiopia, to that glory. So we cannot wipe away this history so easily. I had someone in the comment in Ethiopia say, look how His Majesty made the people starve, and he had his birthday party and he spent millions, and this propaganda that the BBC and the world power spread against His Majesty, and this is what the detractors are using in 2023 to try to dissuade I and I from hailing the king. So you're trying to invalidate the building of modern Ethiopia coming from the Chasmatch stage, 1905, when he started his reforms in Harar as a teenager. You're trying to invalidate that legacy with a birthday party, brethren and sisters. And do you have receipts that this birthday cost $1 million? And do you have evidence that if that $1 million was spent on the drought, that the drought would have been ended and the people's problems would have been alleviated? Let us use common sense, family, when we're critiquing. I don't have any problem with my Ethiopian family critiquing His Majesty, and I love it because it makes I and I go dig deeper and research. But when you come with the propaganda talking points, you know what I mean, of these Western imperialists, it don't, you know what I mean, that can't shake I and I because it don't make no sense. And it's very surface, you know. His Majesty invited these foreign powers to come and help with the drought, and they made a hit piece against him once the drought was publicized. So, you know, to say that His Majesty was not going to accept international help when he used the international community to build Ethiopia just doesn't gel with the facts, family. So we're done with that narrative about His Majesty and the famine and all of that is weak. Again, behold the upright mark the perfect man, because the end of that man is peace. His Majesty made a militant stand for peace. So I say all of that to say to my FANO brothers and sisters that the solution is at the negotiating table. Yes, the ethnic constitution must be destroyed. There's no way that an ethnic constitution is going to build unity. It's a bad idea. It's one Ethiopia. We're not saying that people cannot celebrate their ethnic identity. And again, this is done through education. I believe Amharic should be the language for the entire Africa. Why? Because the Amharic script is indigenous to Africa. We don't want to be writing African language with European or Latin script. You know what I mean? So if we don't have a written script, which Ethiopia alone, you know, have the indigenous script, you know, this is why I would give Amharic the edge over Swahili, because Swahili was still writing in Latin script. Amharic should be the national language. Addis Ababa is already the capital. You know, these are things that we can work together to make it happen. One Africa, one Ethiopia. The longer that we delay in Ethiopia, the longer it's going to take us to achieve this one Africa that our ancestors, everyone wanted to see, where we can actually raise the standard of living for the regular people. Because remember, the people in Singapore standard of living is nice. How does this perpetual war benefit anyone other than the arms dealerships and some of the elites that make the deals, that enrich themselves, that bank their money in European capitals, American capitals? You know what I mean? How does that benefit the man on the ground who's doing the fighting, whose blood is being shed? It doesn't. The future is at the negotiating table. The future for FANO is to educate the people about the history, educate the people about His Majesty, educate the people about the great legacy, about what unity can do under that throne, and what it means. You know, we want to see the Crown Council, and I've been reasoning with ones affiliated and telling them education has to be the main priority right now, to combat the propaganda that's being pumped in to divide and rule. This is so important, and that's what this channel we're going to be doing. So I'm going to do a series on the era of princes, the Zamani Mesafit, because that's what they're trying to return us to. And I feel like we need some more education about that period, where there was very little development. We could even call it the Dark Ages for Ethiopia because of the perpetual war that was happening at that time, Emperor Theodros ended that era and started, the foundations that led to the development of modern Ethiopia that Menelik, Johannes, and then Haile Selassie built upon. So they want to return us to that cycle of perpetual war where everybody is right, nobody's wrong. We separate into kingdoms and we fight. Ethiopians, let us reject that. Let us stand for one Ethiopia. I will do my role and tell the story from the lion's perspective. Why? Because the time has come for the lions to tell our own story. And this is the lion's voice.
Well, the leaders of the world have failed in their responsibility to lead the youths them to a brighter future. Well, I hear the conquering line of the tribe of Judah, Earth's rightful ruler. How just the way Rastafari crowd, unconquerable. We come to tell them about Babylon, they're falling down to far right, it's uncle you. We come to tell them about the way Rastafari crowd, unconquerable. We come to tell them about Babylon, they're falling down to far right, it's uncle you. We come to tell them about Holy Palace intrigue, infighting between Solomon seed. Well, Empress tied to want her family to lead. Well, King Michael want him son to lead, but King Michael now watch the orphan married to him niece, who get up every day and a study and a read. He work and he pray every day. He achieve. Them say you're the leader. Every nation need a just the way Rastafari crown, unconquerable. Me come to tell them about Babylon, they're falling down to far right, it's uncle you. Me come to tell them about the way Rastafari crown, unconquerable. Me come to tell them about Babylon, they're falling down to far right, it's uncle you. Well, Ras Michael, son was having a good time when he should mind the affairs of the state, cause he's descended from the great line of Menelik II. But he's stepping on toes of his elders, treat his women like hoes, he exposed. Now we working with the Ottoman Turks, say he's descending from Muhammad, but that's not how this works. See, the crown was anointed by the Orthodox Church, so if you're all ruling as I done, you have to put Christ first.